Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. You see those just a couple of changes on that docs?
I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Yeah, very small stuff. I just added a little bit that made it a little smoother, but for the most part, it's all good. I liked it
Okay.
all. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. Um, what was I gonna say? I guess it doesn't matter. All right. Well, another day in Paris. Hey, on that report, um, that's just a template, right? I mean, we'll have a nice finished, clean copy.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
for sure.
I'm sure there was. I just thought I'd ask the obvious, just in case. Oh,
Tawny's in the waiting room.
all right.
Morning.
Morning, Tony. Morning, Arthur.
Hey Rick, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Good holiday? Everything good?
Yeah,
Right on.
got a sunburn, ate a hot dog, all those things. How about you?
Not too bad. Grandkids.
Very nice.
Yeah. They're at the age finally where they're enjoying fireworks. So they're
My
just
son is
turning
yeah,
their
how
head
old,
every way. Look at that, look at that.
how old are they?
Oh, one is 4 and then the other one's 7.
Okay. My son is 18 months. So we decided to skip the fireworks this year, but he did love the parade and the fire trucks. He thought that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of it, he wanted more.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But fireworks, I think we'll wait another year or two.
Yeah, yeah. It's the only reason I buy fireworks anymore is for the grandkids. Or else I
I've
just
outgr-
sit in my backyard and watch them going off everywhere else.
yeah, I've outgrown it myself. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why.
Morning. Is that Lauren on the phone? I think you're muted. Got an email from Lauren that she'll be attending by phone.
Oh, there she is.
I'm sorry. I always forget that I have to hit *6 to unmute, and I'm just always hitting my phone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Now I will mute myself, but I guess I'm not quite sure how to do it in Zoom, but I'm going to mute myself through my phone, hopefully.
All right. Well, I guess we're at 9:01 and we can go through and do we take a roll, Carrie? Say who's here for the minutes, or is that not necessary?
I think so. And I'm gonna take minutes as soon as I get everybody admitted through the waiting room. Since Shauna's on vacation, she's been taking our minutes.
Okay. Maybe we can just all kind of get going by saying our own names and hello this morning. Does that sound good? Okay, so I'm Tawny Reeder and I'm from Craft 3 and I'm located in Bend, Oregon, and we're a lending partner for the manufactured home replacement program. Rick, do you want to go next? We could just call on the next person maybe to make it most efficient.
Yeah, why don't I do that? Austin, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Bosworth. I'm with the Oregon Office of Community Dispute Resolution. My colleague Patrick was a consistent member of this group, and I'm just going to be taking over due to Patrick's workload. So really happy to be here and honored to join the space with you, and thank you.
Yeah, Everett, since you're next on my list there, I'm on my screen. Go ahead.
Yeah, Everett Horvath. I'm the manufactured housing navigator for OHCS.
Rose?
Hi, everyone. Rose Ojeda, Director of Manufactured Housing and Cooperative Development with CASA of Oregon.
Ed Brown?
Ed Brown. I work with OHCS in the Affordable Rental Housing Division with the Preservation of Manufactured Dwelling Parks program.
Arthur?
Arthur Chapman with Business Oregon. I'm a Regional Development Officer and we're the State Economic Development Agent.
All right. Kat?
Sorry, I was a minute or two late. They insisted on updating my Zoom, even though I didn't want to. So I apologize for being late. Catherine Dalton, I'm the Executive Director of Community Solutions here in Central Oregon, serving Jefferson, Crook, and Deschutes County.
Okay, and then I forgot who was on the phone. Forgive me.
It's Lauren it's Lauren Winters from the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation. We oversee the licensing of manufactured home park owners and dealers.
Good deal. Hey, could you do me a favor, Lauren? And, oh, you can't, but if you could send us an email. Sometimes we get questions from out of state of people who had registered their manufactured home, but don't know where to look for copies of that information. Would you happen to have that?
And when you say they've registered, send me an email.
I will.
With the specifics, and then I will tell you what it is that we actually do.
Perfect.
We
Perfect.
actually are responsible for licensing people who want to sell or finance manufactured homes, because we oversee mortgage loan originators, and we are the agency that put in the exemption for the dealers in the parks.
Perfect. Thank you. Is it Pickler? Is it Pickler?
It's Pickler.
Pickler.
Yeah, and so I work with Tony Reeder at Craft 3 as with the manufactured home replacement program.
Great. And Alec?
Alec from Umatilla Electric Cooperative. We've got kind of our own program that we do. What we use the state as well. I think we're up to our 4th manufactured home replacement through the REST USDA program. So,
Great, thank you. Bill?
Morning, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Bill Van Vliet with NOAA, excuse me, Network for Affordable Housing.
And Keeble?
Good morning, Keeble Jeskin from the home ownership team. Thank you.
And of course, Carrie?
Good morning, I'm Carrie Hodai. I'm with OHCS and I manage the Manufactured Home Replacement Loan Program.
Perfect. I think that's it, Tony.
We have Andre. She's emailed this morning and will be here about 15 minutes late, so we'll see her in about 10 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for that welcome. We've got a couple items on the agenda today. And first up, Bill, if you're ready, we'd like to hear from you about the legislative session and its end and any updates that passed that were relevant to manufactured housing.
Sorry, maybe that helps. There were a couple of bills and dealing with manufactured housing that I worked on with a number of folks on the screen here. And one of them did finally pass in the final days of the session. We were a little nervous about that. It got caught up in the Republican walkout, but it made it through, and that's House Bill 3151. And that does a number, about 4 primary things, all policy related, no money in that bill. one of the things it did is, and we've talked about these before, but for those of you who are new or might not have remembered, one of them is when manufactured home parks are being either newly constructed or reconstructed, it clarifies which improvements a park owner can require the homeowner to install. There's always a package of improvements that go with every pad space. We were seeing incidents where, especially in the wildfire recovery areas, some of the investor owners were sort of creeping into park infrastructure costs and passing those on to the residents. And so we put some limitations and clarifications on what could and could not be charged of a resident when they moved in as a condition of occupancy. There's still a healthy list of things that residents can be required to pay for, things like sheds and certain kinds of walkways and things like that. But a lot of the things like concrete driveways and park walkways and park lighting fixtures can't be passed on to the residents anymore. So that will help some. It won't eliminate the big check that new residents have to pay to move in, but it will help some. It helped clarify and extend the sunset on a dispute resolution program around manufactured housing residents, which was a big priority for the Oregon Law Center. And so that was important. There were some limitations where the previous law that had passed had been interpreted more conservatively than the intent, and so they went back and put that expressly into the law and went ahead and extended it out since they were approaching sunset. We expanded the definition of affordable housing when it comes to land use on certain areas to include manufactured home parks if they were owned by mission-based ownership models. Essentially, those of you who might remember Senate Bill 8 from the 21 session, which sort of removed the requirement of local jurisdictions to require zoning changes to cite affordable housing in certain zones. And this just expanded that to include manufactured home parks into that definition. So it should assist in helping find new sites for new parks on a more streamlined basis and not have to go through some of the land use processes. So more of a clear path to development is really what we're hoping for out of that. And then finally, it expands the eligible uses for the manufactured home park acquisition funds, and that's a pot of resources that the department has delivers through CDFIs, and I know both CASA and NOAA have those resources. It expands the eligible use from exclusively acquisition of parks to include construction loans for new parks, because construction financing for park development is very challenging, and we can now use those resources under statute to help finance construction of new parks and increase the supply of manufactured housing communities in the state. And that's been one of the goals that our work group has had, is to find tools and resources to help pave the way for more development of parks owned by mission-based ownership models. So that's co-ops, nonprofits, and housing authorities. And so this sort of package of things hopefully just removes some barriers along the way. What we didn't get across the finish line was actual money dedicated for new park construction. We were hoping to carve that out, and so we'll work on that in future sessions, and maybe there's resources available from other places that we can talk to the department about allocating some, even just on a pilot basis, to get a new park or two constructed. I guess the final thing I should comment on is one of the major funding resources for manufactured home parks and the programs administered through OHCS has been for preservation of parks. That's typically been allocated under an umbrella of preservation resources. And that bucket of resources ended up being considerably smaller than we expected it to be. We had actually specifically asked for a carve out of about 38 million for parks alone. We didn't get that. We didn't get any specific carve out, but the total, we think, it's a little confusing when I look at the different budget bills, but I've been assured from the department that the total for all preservation is only 50 million, which is a drop in the bucket for what the total preservation need is. And then parks have to compete in that for some of that allocation. So we've got a hurdle there for preserving parks in the next year or two that we're going to have to really sort of knuckle down on and see if we can get creative. So I think that's the highlight. I think the highlights of what I can think of. There's, I'm sure, other stuff that will tangentially fit into that, but that's kind of the legislative update that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Bill. Does anyone have any questions for Bill? Anything that came up there that you want to dig into further?
I got a quick question for you, Bill. With the new governor's, I don't know, I guess you could say agenda, did that strip a lot of funds from other programs for that, or is it just the way the ball bounces?
I don't know that you could say that it stripped money, because most of the new money that came into the agency was lift money, and that's not a resource that's available for preservation, for instance. It's not structured that way. I think there's an open question about whether it could be used for new park development, so maybe there's opportunities there. I don't know why it couldn't be, because new parks would be similar to new apartment buildings, but it would be a new way for the agency to administer that. So, you know, I think, you know, for the OHCS team on this call, that'd be an interesting conversation to start having internally, or to use this group to help advocate for new park development.
Any other questions? And Everett, I hate to skip around on the agenda, but it seems appropriate to actually go into your segment of the agenda with the update on your funding and what happened with that. So are you prepared to go into that segment now?
Rick, did you want to take this, or do you want me to?
We could tag team it.
Yeah,
We
I
can start.
agree.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, Tawny. I think maybe Rick.
So
Yeah, Rick, can you?
Everett's like, no. Yeah. Well, basically, we, as you're all aware, is we were awarded or allocated $2.5 million, of which we have to take our administrative fees out of that as well, which brings that number down. We originally asked for 8 million and got it cut down to 2.5, which means that we're not going to be able to help as many people as we thought. The real number, a realistic number, is somewhere under 15 homes as far as helping to replace as currently we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Everett and Carrie, we have around 78 applications coming in. And so something we're gonna have to keep an eye on at some point. We should be fully allocated extremely early in this process, we'll say, once we go through all the applications. So once that happens, we're gonna have to just suspend applications, taking applications, and if not stop it altogether. And we're hoping that some of the Oregonians that are involved in trying to get their homes replaced would maybe talk to their legislators about trying to get additional funds into this program. But at 2.5 was, in all honesty, it was not something we expected. But our attitude now is, hey, that's $2.5 million, and that's at least 15 people families we can assist. And so that's the positive attitude we're taking towards it, of that whole starfish story of, it may not mean a lot to everybody, but it means a lot to the one. So that's where our focus and emphasis is going. Did I miss anything there, Everett? I know you get a lot of the phone calls. You can maybe let everybody know about what's coming in with that. And then Kara, if you want to talk about what inquiries you're getting.
I think what we've had is once our previous funding was fully allocated, we suspended processing new applications, but Everett and I have kept track of our inquiries since then. And right now, from the general email for the program, general email inquiries, we've got a list of about 50 folks that are waiting to apply. Everett's got how many? Over 20, 30?
As of this morning, right around 38, but they come in daily. So
And then I'm gonna hand it over to Everett to talk about the folks that he's been working more closely with, that we're anticipating are gonna that are a little bit further along, that have been fairly proactive, that he's anticipating, I think, being ready to move forward, I think. And what those home replacement projects are looking like.
yeah, so we had a lot of interest in the program. We suspended back in March, April. And so there's a lot of interest. It grew between April and then July 5th, when we started reaching out to folks again. And that interest has grown significantly. With the help of ETO and Eddie Cepeda, who is their navigator. Yeah, he's reached out to the majority of the preserve communities, and so we've got tons of interest there. I would say right now we're probably at about a 60-40 split, 60% being preserved parks and 40% fee simple. It's going to be really interesting for us to see how we manage this money, since it is a lot less than we were expecting. We do have the availability of our new energy grant to subsidize a lot of these loans. So I think our philosophy is to help as many folks as we can. The dilemma for us is, who's going to get the funding with such a great demand. So we're working through our process. We've changed a lot of our processes. We front loaded some stuff that we used to do on the back end to gather more data, with the hopes that we can show a huge amount and some solid demographics of those folks who are waiting for funding, so we can go ask for more money. Is there any questions?
I've got one, Everett. Is Eddie still out in the communities sharing information about the program? And what is his message, knowing that 80 or so folks have already expressed interest or applied, and we won't be able to fund but a portion?
Well, and that's a great question, Tawny. I speak to Eddie almost on a daily basis. As my goal was to go out to travel and to a lot of these preserved communities, but I don't know, it might be redundant at this point. I'm so swamped with taking in these new applications, and then I have to find time to process them because they come in as a pretty raw product, and then I gotta, put them into our pipeline, into our process. So we have, usable information on the clients. I would say we're pretty consistent right now. I think our message is, hey, this program's available, everybody apply. So the worst case scenario is we're going to, if we can have 150 applicants and good data to support those applicants, I think that's going to help us plead our case, moving forward, asking for additional funds. So that's what our message is right now, is just, hey, the program's available, please submit an application. I think once we process those applications and then I hate to use the word choose or figure out who will get the funding, then we'll discuss what we want to do from there. And I think Rick obviously will have a lot of weight in that discussion.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just I guess now we're sort of in a, early on, we had to really work to get the money out and find people to come in the door. Now we've got the other issue. Does that, I guess, two allocation or sort of prioritization questions, does that maybe change your thoughts about, the cap on the per home and see if you can't, hit more homes with less subsidy each? And then the other question is about sort of how you're considering the split of allocations between decommissioning and new home acquisitions.
The answer to the first question is, if we lower the limit, that there's a lot that by lowering the limit, you also then lower the number of people that actually can qualify. Because I would say, from what I understand, the majority of our applications are at a 50% AMI. Is that correct, Everett?
Basically, it's about 38% AMI for the majority of applicants.
And that's with using the current max. If we lower that, then we're not going to help those who have less ability to get any kind of funding. And so that was a major discussion that we actually talked about in length and decided to leave it where it is. And then I'm sorry, I was thinking about that answer, and forgive me, what was your second question, Bill?
Had to do with decommissioning and how much money you'd put towards decommissioning costs versus new home subsidies. And there's some folks that just need decommissioning, and is that still going to be available to them?
Absolutely. Normally, we're with some of these homes, anytime we replace a home, we have to remove the old home. So there's a max of 15,000 on that. And then we just have some nonprofits actually, and some people that just, they're especially some that are trying to settle wildfires still, that decided not to go back to their home and need to get whatever's remaining on the existing home removed. And so we've been doing some of that. So we're still just providing funds for decommissioning on its own. Everett, did I miss anything?
Yeah, one thing. So Bill, we got the ability to do $25,000 energy grants for folks in the ETO footprint. So our strategy is to, for example, on a single wide, is have the loan amount 75,000 and then subsidize the rest of it with the ETO grants. So we can stretch that dollar as far as we can. So the big question is I think our plan right now is to process a batch of about 30 applicants, and then as a team sit down and review those applicants and see how we can maximize the dollar, and then based on need and time.
So
go ahead.
just,
Sorry.
I wanted to kind of clarify and follow Everett on that, is the idea with allowing, or not allowing, but taking in as many applications as possible at the front end is so that we can gather that demographic information and be able to show where the need is, what the need is, who's applying, gather income information, and explain that there's a big both a time difference and a project difference between meeting the general eligibility on an application and figuring out actual replacement project feasibility. There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered, and not every eligible applicant, not every applicant's project becomes feasible, because they do have to be able to afford it. And every homeowner, there ends up being a homeowner contribution, the loans and the ETO grant and even weatherization grant and decommissioning grant, they don't cover the whole project. So, unfortunately, we have to tell some folks, it's just not possible. Even if their home is in dire need of replacement, they might just, not be able to make that contribution, or but we have to, review them all to be able to make that determination. So we are fortunate to have that weatherization grant to be able to make the MH loans go a little farther. And so we're being really strategic in that way to try to reach more than, just a little over a dozen people. Maybe we can make it go to 15 or 16 if they're in the ETO footprint.
Yeah, let me kind of follow up with that, what Carrie said. So Bill, basically for a single wide replacement, there's usually a gap anywhere from $10,000 to say $25,000. And so the folks that are going to be in the 20% AMI area, they just simply don't have the capacity to borrow the money to make their project work. On the double wide, that gap grows to about $50,000 on average. So there's still a significant chunk of money that the homeowner has to come up with to complete that project. So we kind of term that, they'll self-select through our process which projects will move forward and which ones won't. But we still would like to have the data to show demand for the program.
How are they filling those gaps, Everett?
A variety of ways. Some folks have it in savings. Some people, especially the folks on fee simple, they'll refinance or get a second mortgage. But for the folks in the preserve parks, it's a hodgepodge. Family member contributions, loans. Some folks have their spouses passed on, so they'll clear out their 401k. This is a variety of ways that folks are coming up with that gap.
And I guess I just add to kind of finish that off is even with when we had I think the total amount was around $6 million total, which we utilized about 4.5. And my numbers could be wrong, but even with the money we did have from the last biennium, we only were able to assist 54 homes. So so you can imagine how much, even with 78 applications, once we threw them along with other applications coming in, we just don't know, how, even if we had additional funds, we don't even know how much that would be. So no matter what, we would always fall short of what's being requested or applied for. So that's always going to be a hard message for people to receive, that funds aren't available, no matter how, the funding goes. So we're just trying to stretch it out as far as we can, and assist across the board, trying to hit demographics and so on. the program is still on a first come, first served basis, but at the same time, we're looking at completed applications and meeting the criteria that we're seeking. So some don't get through the review, once they get through a review process, some never get to the next step. So and it happens more than you think. It's not that we're just trying to get, for lack of a better term, shovel ready, we'll say. They're ready to go. And so and that's the best we can do. We're always going to have to send that terrible message out that you don't qualify or we're out of money. But it's something that's the real the reality of it, we'll say. But I believe that's all we got, unless someone has another question.
I've got two questions for you guys. One's an easy one, I think, and one is maybe a little sharper. So the easy one, I know that a lot of the CDBG disaster recovery money is now coming online, and I'm wondering if you've been able to layer that, in the fire affected areas with this program, or if it's just incompatible funding, or what's up.
That funding is strictly for the disaster recovery.
Yep.
So
and
we're now completely separated from that.
isn't some of that being used to rebuild housing like up in the Sandy Am Canyon or in Phoenix and so?
For their housing, not for what we're doing.
But a lot of those are mobile homes, right?
Yes, but
Have you
we're
been-
replacing pre-1995 homes that are not affected by the wildfire. If someone says I have a wildfire home, we forward them to disaster recovery.
Okay, so no, yeah, they're incompatible, not layerable.
Correct.
Well, that's not necessarily true. If they're at a higher AMI, above 100% AMI, because our rules allow for it, correct, Rick? That if they're above 100% AMI, then we'll go ahead and pick those up. Well, if we had funding, we'd pick those up, but so yeah, we're not completely out of the game, only for certain individuals that are above 100% AMI.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Correct, but the loans can't be combined. Like, they
So-
can't layer.
High level, because I'm not in the weeds on this. It sounds like we're taking applications, we don't have funding. Is that, and you need the data to support to get more funding, understand that. But is there a better way to just get the data without going through the application process that we know is not funded? It seems to me if I'm on the other end of this conversation, I'm filling out an application for nothing except for data.
The application
makes
is 2 pages. It's really basic information for just initial eligibility. And we really, we went back and forth on it, whether or not to accept applications. And it comes down to a right to apply and we couldn't foresee any other means of doing it. There's
Sure, it's a balance, but are they
Yeah.
understanding that the program is currently not funded, but, step in line kind of thing? I mean, I feel like, it's always a false promise when you say, apply for this, but by the way, we don't have money. But, the flip side of that is apply for this, by the way, that will help us get money and you're in a queue.
I see what you're saying, Alec, and I think what we've decided is we will continue to take applications until we know we're out of money. Does that make sense? Because we don't know right now. So we're sitting on X amount of applications, but they haven't even, we haven't had time to really even start the process. So in the next, whatever time frame it takes us to sift through these applications and get the money allocated. Once the money's allocated, Rick, I believe we're going to shut the application process off.
And actually, once we hit 100, we're actually going to have a discussion on whether to suspend at that point. And again, until and Everett made a good point, is that right now we know the math is what the math is. We know we're not going to be able to fund all these, but at the same time, we're not fully allocated yet. And at the same time, we don't want to tell someone, don't apply, we don't have money. And then when all of our documentation that we send out says it's subject, all of the allocations are subject to fund availability. So we do explain it at the beginning.
Thanks.
And in the past, we were trying to get money out the door, right? What Bill said. And so we took a lot more time with each applicant, right, to get them qualified and get their project and help them get their financing. So we don't know, is it going to be 1 out of 10 applications is going to make it? Is it, we just don't know what that number is with these new applications, because we're not vetting them through the pipeline. So before, the application came at the end of the process. So we'd meet with a client, we'd get all their, figure out what their project estimate is, make sure it was funded. And then once everything was shovel ready, we would do the application. We're just putting the application on the front end. So if they disqualified in the process, they never got to the application phase. So now we're just putting the application phase in the front end of the process to help us get the data that we need moving forward.
Thanks for that.
So I'm going to ask one more question, guys. 38% AMI is pretty low AMI. Those are people who are financially struggling and certainly need help. And I'm curious if we have any method of tracking outcomes. I'm worried that this may be less helpful than we think to help them get into a home, clear out their 401k, cash out their savings. Can they actually afford to live in these? And do we have any way of tracking that over time? Maybe that's another legislative request. But I mean, are they able to pay the taxes, keep the lights on, and maintain these things?
Well, that's a good question. I think we will tell over time. But what I believe is so Carrie and I, we work really hard to make sure that their income to housing ratio is right. So if we keep them in that income to housing ratio, that we're trying to set them up for success. So if they were able to sustain themselves, let's say in a preserve park, right? Because the rents are low, they have a better community support service. So if they've been in that park for say 10 years, and we're not really changing their income to housing ratio, then it should sustain itself. And that's why we look at that when we process these applications, to make sure that it's reasonable, right? We don't want 50% ratios for income to housing, because that's a recipe for failure. So does that answer your question?
It does, sort of. I just feel that not everybody should be a homeowner, right? And I wonder if people in 30% AMI really, that's a hard scrabble income bracket. And I wonder if there's a way we can try to check back with them a year, 2, 5, 10, into the process. And I know that that's not something that's been funded by this bill. Like, you guys don't have, money set aside to do that. But I guess I was just curious your thoughts on that process. And yeah, I guess just wanted to voice that concern there. Homeownership is painfully expensive. And even with a new home that should be relatively maintenance free, the costs just keep coming.
And we do look at their housing cost ratio to their monthly income. And if they're overextended debt to income ratio prior to the home replacement project, and then looking to take on a loan, figuring out what that estimated debt to income ratio is going to be, and their housing cost, monthly housing cost at completion of the replacement project. If that's going to be something that's just not sustainable, we take a look at that in reviewing the project and whether or not that project is feasible for that applicant. And so when I talked about how, the the length of time and difference between an application, that 2-page application, and somebody meeting that just general eligibility criteria, being below 100% AMI, having a home that's built prior to 1995, and being in the right location. There's a big difference between that and the project being feasible, but folks that meet that criteria have the right to fill out that application and work with us to figure out if their project is feasible. And that's where we decided to take in those applications and work with people to, as Everett put it, they kind of self-select. And until we figure out, which projects are going to move forward, we're not just taking an application and allocating. When we were working hard to get the money out the door, we were just taking that basic information and committing funds and allocating funds until we figured out, oh, this project's not going forward. Okay, those funds aren't allocated anymore. They're back in the pot, and and we'd work with the next person. And we're kind of working in the opposite direction now. We're not allocating and committing funds until we know it's shovel ready. Because it's not fair to the next person of those 80+ people that are eligible that, want to try. So that's kind of the process we've worked on creating is really trying to figure out which ones can get going and be really feasible, sustainable home replacement projects. First.
And then I know, Andre, you have a question. Homes are, from what we've done from the previous biennium, homes are barely being placed. So it's a great question, but we don't have any information on that, only because this just started. The other, one of the requirements is they stay in their home for 10 years. So if they can't, we're going to know right away. They're going to let us know, hey, I got to move. I can't do this. So we'll be able to document that. So as we go forward, we're going to know who can and can't sustain their home. So that might be, I don't say that might be, that will be that'll tell us a lot as to who can, was this, successful, not successful? And do we have to then look at a higher minimum qualification? The intent is just to replace a home that should have been decommissioned. That's the intent. And so unfortunately, that means normally it's to those who are the lower AMI because they can't take care of the home or haven't been able to, or they inherited it and they just moved in without making any changes to it. Andre?
I was just going to say, if it's of interest and helpful, down the road when people have been in their home long enough, I'd volunteer to put together a survey that you guys can send out to people just sort of to check in. And I'd need someone to translate it. And depending on whether they're qualitative or verbal, words, or a box you check for different things, I might need some help with translating the results if they're in Spanish. But I could do that for you just as a volunteer, a freebie little mini research thing. The other thing I'd be willing to do, if it makes sense at some point, if we can get enough people together, I'd be happy to do like a 6 to 8 person focus group that just sort of checks in. You get different kinds of information from that kind of research that just asks questions like, how you doing? How are things going? What's changed in your life for the better? What's been a little bit harder? Those kinds of non-judgmental questions where we can begin to get a feel for what's going on and just kind of check in. And that kind of qualitative stuff, you don't have to wait a year or so. Changes start happening in the first year. So again, it's up to you guys whether you want to do it. Feel free to reach out. It's one of the few things I can do to help here.
Thanks, Andre. We'll definitely keep that in mind. Again, we just started placing homes, so it'd be early right now to try to get that done, but definitely keep that in mind. Thanks. I guess we can move down the agenda or up the agenda.
Yeah, that sounds great. So the last thing on the agenda for today is the committee report, the Manufactured Housing Advisory Committee report to the Housing Stability Council. And Carrie attached it to the invite. We wanted to ask if folks had an opportunity to review it and if there are any questions or comments at this time. If there aren't any that want to be shared during the meeting, that's fine too. You could email Carrie and I to ask those or make those comments, and we'd be happy to respond. Andre?
Those are just clapping hands.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Well, all of that credit and clapping hands go to Carrie. So. And team.
I do have a question, and it's mainly because I was in that meeting yesterday, the advisory committee meeting. If anyone has feedback for me, just in terms of being on the ground and doing the mediations that we do for the manufactured home people, is one of the things that was mentioned yesterday is that a lot of the people end up not coming to tenants who call and have an issue. Even if it's a legitimate issue that they have protections from, a lot of them are scared to go through the mediation. They back down. They're scared of retribution from the landlord and the owner. And I've had two in the last month where mainly through my outreach through the Latino Community Association, we've had a lot of calls from some mobile home parks where they're primarily Spanish speaking people who live there. And they are really scared to reach out and ask for help. And I'm wondering, is there anything in the legislation anywhere, because I haven't read every word, where there are protections? I mean, one of them actually forwarded an email that the manager had sent to her saying, you know, you shouldn't be reaching out and asking for help from anybody. It was a sort of veiled threat. So yeah, she did get some retribution. And what are their protections beyond, you know, almost like whistleblower law or something that anybody knows of? Or how is that handled?
Refer them to the Oregon Law Center. That could assist them if they're having or have fears that they could discuss that with Oregon Law Center we assist with some funding on that for manufactured housing tenants.
Is there a process for the funding piece, Rick?
The process is done. Yeah, so there was a process. But so now it's all in place.
I mean, if somebody needs that funding, how do they go about?
Well, it's not the fund. We fund the Oregon Law Center, an attorney there, and all they need to do is call into the center, and then let them know that that they're a manufactured housing tenant, and then that's recorded, and then there's a specific attorney that deals with that. And they could just go on the website for Oregon Law Center and then find the law center in their area.
Bill, I heard in your 4 points about HB 3151 that there's a clarity about the resolution process for disputes. Is there anything in there that might help to address this question?
I don't know. That's a good question. I just made myself a note to check in with some of the folks at the Oregon Law Center about that. I think, so I don't know. is short answer. I do also want to check in with them about whether there's any other statutory changes we might consider that would give, this is the kind of stuff that used to go through what used to be known as the Landlord Tenant Coalition, but that's been disbanded now. But I'm wondering if there isn't some statutory changes we could look at. I don't know the answer to that, but they would. So I'll ask that question. Because this is just an upsetting type of thing, and we know it happens, but when you hear about it so directly, it's just really troubling.
Thank you. So if there are no questions or comments about the report, we do have a little bit of time if there are any like walk-on items that anyone wants to bring up. Carrie?
I did want to find out if or just have a decision get made whether or not the MHAC report get just sent to the Stability Council or presented to them. I don't know how it's been done before. Is it both?
You can check with Chelsea on that. I know we did a presentation once at least. I can't remember if there's more than once. Honestly, I mean, they were attentive and appreciative. I don't know that it really meant anything to them at the end of the day, to be honest, not to be disrespectful of the council, but they've got so much on their plate right now. So I think that would be just an internal question you guys just need to sort out with leadership.
We just present it and are available for questions. It'll be in their packet. They read it. We present it. And just ask if anybody had any questions about it. It's almost the way we present rule changes.
Okay.
And Bill, were you at did you attend that meeting? Because I saw that your name was on it, but I was do you remember if you
Which
actually
one?
were on the meeting, or in case they asked you a question, or just I think it was just Chelsea presenting, but I can't remember. It's been a while.
She and I both presented jointly.
Yeah,
at
okay.
one. I don't know if she did a second one that I wasn't in attendance at, but I know she and I both jointly presented at one of them. But that was a few years ago, probably. It's probably early COVID or something like that.
Yeah, it was way back.
Yeah.
So Tawny, I guess in this case, then you would just need to be present. We'd answer all the questions for the most part, but they like to put names to faces or faces to names, one or the other, both.
Is there a date from that meeting yet that you can send me?
No, because I would have to send, we'd have to send it in as part of a package. So we'll get it all cleaned up. I mean, this is just a copy for everybody to look at. And then we will let everybody answer. More than likely, it'll go into September. The earliest would be September, House Stability Council meeting, if not October, depending on their agenda. Sometimes they have a full agenda. They're like, let's move on to the next one. Because like Bill says, it's more of a real quick thing that unless they have questions, they just say thank you very much and then move on. So if they have a busy agenda, they feel they can just move that over.
Great, thank you.
Two quick things, if it's okay. One is just to keep people sort of informed about the Hope Community Development Factory, manufactured home factory, and that's still on track to launch production this fall, probably September, October. So they've got a couple of prototypes. They've got a single wide prototype that they have constructed and have available. And they're working on a double wide prototype that they'll also have available for looking at. but they're really hoping their price points are going to be a notch below where the industry is. And so I just want to sort of point that out to everybody, to make you aware of that it's going to be another resource for affordable homes coming into the marketplace. Those of you aware of projects too, certainly they'll be looking to build their sales pipeline. The other and any questions about that before I get to my second? The other question.
I do, Bill. So having my ear to the ground, a lot of the folks in the industry, the rumor is they're several months behind schedule. Do you have any contact over there?
Oh yeah, I'm on the board. And I think we're still on track. I don't think we're behind schedule. I'm not sure what that would be referring to. Everything I've heard is that they're still targeting October for production, which has been in the works for quite some time. Now they still have their final regulatory approvals to get and whatnot. You just never know. And there's some supply chain issues they've battled in getting some of the equipment, but I think they continue to be on track. I think one of the slowest things has just been getting some of the building permit stuff nailed down through Eugene. I guess the other thing is a question, if anybody knows on staff, is there any resource in the green residual, I don't know, even GRRP money? It's the big gazillions of dollars that Congress allocated through the infrastructure bill, or the recovery bill, I can't remember what it was, Inflation Reduction Act, I guess, that could be used to support our replacement program. It seems like this would be an ideal use of that kind of a resource if we can tailor the right kind of request.
You know, Bill, I've been watching that for the utility side. I haven't seen it. It's more, renewable energy infrastructure, grid resilience type programs. At least, again, I'm not taking a broad look, but to that end, on the 2023 farm reauthorization bill, there was a traveling group from DC, and there's 2 or 3 points that I testified about on the RESP loan, which is what we use for our program. We're the only utility in Oregon that takes advantage of that, both for energy savings loans, but also for our manufactured home. Part of that's the upfront costs. So one of the proposed changes in the new bill is a 5% out of that loan amount to be used forgivable for administrative fees. So hopefully we can bootstrap more folks to be looking at what we're doing. And I think the second, there's 2 other points. One is it's typically a 10-year repayment back to USDA. They want to stretch that to 20 years, which will help the members in that program. And the third, kind of more important to this group, is right now the manufactured home replacement is just in rule, and it's looking to put it into statute. So we've been working on that on the DC side.
That's great. Thanks, Alec. I know HUD is putting out a bunch of money too under that program, and so that just makes me think it'll be more housing centric. But that's just starting, I believe.
Yeah, politically, it's typically a bipartisan bill, but the SNAP subsidies makes it controversial, and then they're trying to pull out of the other IRA and other funding bills. Trying to split the baby on money. So we're hoping it steadies its course, but it's in the political realm right now.
I wanted to, and I don't have an answer to your question, Bill, but we do have a public affairs analyst at Craft 3 who's been tracking the greenhouse gas reduction funding. And so I'm going to put in a question to him to see if, from what he's seen and heard and continues to research, if he sees any overlay
Yeah. It's Tony, to your point, the same thing for us. We've, as they get, NOIs get released of what they're funding, and it's, you know, everyone says it's generational money, but it's slow trickling programming. You know, I think the energy efficiency rollout has not yet happened, and I think those will be the buckets that we can look at and see if we can nose dive into those. But again, those haven't really rolled out yet at this point.
Bill, I think Rick had stepped away when you asked that question. Can you ask it again or sort of explain about that, the Reduction Act funding?
Yeah, it's just the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act funding, and there's, you know, a gazillion of dollars coming through for energy improvements, and but also a lot of that's being targeted towards improving the housing stock. And the question is, you know, is there going to be a resource there that we could use to layer for some of these replacements? Because I think that would be a pretty logical application for that. To help augment your bucket of money to fund the program.
That's definitely a good good question or statement that we can look into for sure and see what our options are. I'd have to talk to Keeble and see what we can do and just kind of move it up the ladder to see what our options are on something like that. But yeah, that's a great idea.
My suggestion would be to reach out to ODO, because they've funded a position to kind of help facilitate federal funding and to lean in. You know, I think ODOT would be doing the same thing because there's going to be ODOT dollars coming too. But I would lean into that agency and put it on their awareness under the energy efficiency flag. And I'm happy to help facilitate that as you need.
And I think Dan Elliott's been tracking it from inside the agency too, so I would check with him.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk to Dan. I can do that today.
Thank you, Bill. I heard gazillion and then MHRP and taking some notes.
Well,
Thanks for the link, Arthur.
great. So it's 10:05. We've gone through all of our agenda items and some walk-ons. I want to make sure no one else has a walk-on item that they wanted to bring up today. If they don't, then we can all earn 25 minutes back onto our day.
Just don't tell anyone.
Just don't tell anyone, go for a walk, get some steps in. Well, it was a good meeting, everybody,
Yeah.
and I thank you all and look forward to seeing you in 2 months.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank
feel free to
you.
contact us if you have any questions.
Are we meeting on Teams?
Yes, at 11:30 though, I have to take my dog to the groomer. She has
First
an
world-
appointment. She's got a
First
beauty
world
appointment.
problems. Yeah. All right. I'll see you then.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.